Hello and welcome to the coronavirus update for the 18th of April 2020, where there are somewhat over 2 million people who have been confirmed to have the virus. About a third of them, just under a third, in the United States. And there are 158,000 people have died from it. Now, I've been tracking the ratio of those two numbers for some time, since there was less than 1 million cases in the world. And, just keeping tabs on the number of confirmed cases and the number of people who died. And the ratio of those two is, in practice, the mortality of the virus. And it starts off at about 4.5%, and now it's up to about 6.5%. Now, you always got to be a little bit careful when looking at these numbers, because there's always this question: how many people are asymptomatic? And I saw a study today from California that suggested that, there were almost everyone was asymptomatic, and the number of cases was maybe 50 times higher than the actual confirmed cases. And I don't know. So I've seen conflicting reports. The early reports from China suggested the mortality was about 2%, and there were relatively few asymptomatic cases. And it's difficult to know until you can get widespread testing. And both of these numbers might actually be correct. It might actually be differences in the way that people are infected, difference in the climate, all that sort of thing might be factors in the mortality. But coming to the China numbers, because I know there will be some people dancing a little jig, because China has increased their death toll from the coronavirus by 1,200 people, by 50%, which proves that they were lying about the numbers. And so I must be a real fool for believing them, and they were smart because now they believe the numbers from China. It's one of those things I just don't get. If you don't believe the numbers, then why would you believe them now? In reality, of course, it's almost the very first thing that I said when looking at the China data, when it was basically the only data in the world, is this comes with all sorts of question marks attached to it. This is long before you come to issues of, is someone actually faking the data? And just to sort of highlight that point, if you take a look at New York City, in the past couple of days, they added another 3,500 to the number of people who died from the coronavirus in New York City, which is, it increased their numbers from about 6,000 to 10,000, an increase of about 30% or something. And these are by no means unique considerations. You take a look at the UK. So actually, let's take a look at some of these countries. The UK, they don't count the people. They only count the people who die in hospitals. They don't count the people who die in old age homes or just at home. They only count people who die in hospital. And the UK, by the way, is not looking good. There is very little in the way of slowdown here. Germany looks like they got on top of it. Well, and even at that, maybe. And Italy is maybe more where you would expect America to mirror, which basically means it's going to be in the linear regime for a long time to come. And you take a look at the US. See, this is now cases per day. There's sort of 4,000 cases per day new. You take a look at America. The idea that you're going to be opening up America in 2 weeks it's unrealistic. Incidentally, I've also been following various stats on America in more detail. So one of them is you take a look at the day-on-day increase in the number of people who actually are confirmed as having the virus, and you get below the red line, then that means eventually you'll get it under control. So America is the blue line here, and it's just about got underneath the red line, which is good. That means that eventually it will come under control, but it's going to take a while. And this incident, it was Italy, and Italy is about a week ahead. And they also, interestingly enough, plateaued out for a bit here. I don't know whether this is a real effect or something. But so those are the confirmed cases in America. And if you take a look at the deaths, so this is the day-on-day change in the rate. So the world spread rate is 1.3. It's getting down to about 1.05. This, by the way, is the huge spike from the extra deaths in New York being counted. And this is an extrapolation here, because at the moment the curve looks like it's flattened out, and it's flattened out above 1.05, which basically means it's never going to come under control. And so you look at the day-on-day deaths in America, and they've got up to about just over 2,000. And if you take this extrapolation here, remember that when I last did these projections, it looked like it was just coming straight down. And if it had done that by about this sort of time, you'd only be looking at about 50,000 dead. If it now does this, you're up to at least 100,000 again. So this is now your projected number of deaths, and it maxes out at about 100,000. In reality, of course, after that sort of maxed out, it'll drift up for maybe another 50% if it sort of follows what Italy is doing. So it looks like it's maybe back on course for 150,000 deaths in America. Now, the one thing I just don't understand is, and it is cropped up again and again in the news recently, and it looks like Donald Trump is pushing to reopen the country. Well, yeah, can do that, but honestly, at this sort of point, what was the point of the $2 trillion bailout? Which, I'll stress these as numbers again, because it's useful to know. If you're going to spend $2 trillion, 2 with 12 zeros, for a bailout, and you're doing that to save 2 million lives, that's 2 with 6 zeros, lives, that means you're spending $1 million for every life that you save. That's what the bailout package cost you. Now, for that, you'd have thought you'd have splurged and actually got some masks or something, but there are now all these protests saying that they want to reopen America again. And Trump is, they're solely Trump supporters who want to reopen the economy, which is, it's dumb on so many levels. You might remember I had a chart that looked a little bit like this. There we go. So this is just going to be your GDP in sort of arbitrary units. This is just years. You've got about that 3% growth on your economy. You're the yellow line here. You let 1% of your population die, you lose 1% of your GDP, essentially in perpetuity. You come out on this line here, the red one. You sacrifice 10% of your GDP, so you go from whatever this was, 110 down to 100. 10% of your GDP, boom, gone for the lockdown. But now you basically are on a parallel line to the one that you're on earlier, which means that losing 10% of your economy for 1 year is about the same as losing 1% of your economy for 10 years. So if you shut down the economy competently and manage to get the virus under control, you put in the infrastructure for testing, for tracing, if you're going to wait for a vaccine, it'll take too long, right? The only game now in town is get the numbers down to manageable levels like they did in South Korea. Then you've got to implement the the control measures, the testing and the tracing. Neither of which I've seen any evidence that they're getting ready for that, either in America or in the UK. Which is bad news bears all around. But anyway, so what happens if you go through the $1 trillion bailout for shutting your economy down, but then just reopen the economy? It's the worst of both worlds. You take the hit to the economy, plus you let 1% of your people die. You're ending up it's the worst possible thing that you can do. You might as well, if you're going to play this game, what the hell was the point of shutting everything down in the first place? And I also saw, it's one of these Fox News things, I think it's Laura Ingraham, sort of saying that, well, yeah, it doesn't look as bad as it was going to be. To which the answer is, are you for real? Did you never look at any of the numbers? This is what the wild spread rate looked like. And from about this point is when America instituted its social distancing stay-at-home orders. And that's what it did to the spread rate. Basically, from fairly early on is when America instituted its quarantine. Had it not done that, by now the entire country would have been infected. Which, to sort of just sit there and say, it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be.
There are far too many unanswered questions tonight. Too much about this doesn't make sense. An insistence of mostly liberal governors to keep states closed that have had comparatively low rates of mortality and that never came close to swamping the healthcare system.
It only affected about 1% of the people. Why did we bother with the quarantine?
It's just pushing people to the brink.
I think it was Laura Ingraham, and she was talking to Fauci, sort of saying, why are we taking this? Why are we making a big deal out of this? Anyway. So, yeah, other people where it looks like it's going to be really bad. Russia is just... This is what it looks like if you didn't do your quarantine, okay? 30% down day increase. Russia looks like it's going to be royally bad. Australia is the other paragon of virtue around the world. South Korea puts everyone else to shame, right? This is the ultimate comeback to... It was all the WHO's fault. It was all China's fault. Korea got it under control fairly early on, as did Australia. I got several people contacted me and said, yeah, in Australia there was a very harsh shutdown put in place very quickly, and yeah, now it's down to manageable levels. Yeah, at this point, if you put the effort in, you've got the infrastructure there to make sure that you can track and test. This is now containable. What America is looking like, this is not containable. Right? There's just no way. And okay, Italy. Yeah, when you take a look at it in terms of, it's going to take a while for this to come down. And Germany, they look promising for a few days, but maybe not so much anymore. Take a look at the daily cases. Daily cases are back up to several thousand a day. But Germany still, actually they've had a bit of a spike in cases. They're up to 3%. 3% now for the mortality in Germany. It's still very good compared to the UK, where it's about 13% or something. Okay, and as ever, India. I don't believe a word of it. I think India is absolutely ridden with the stuff. It's just a feeling, but Yeah, if you don't have the testing facilities in place. Okay, so I'm going to call it quits there. If you found that useful, give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.